Hello, everybody. It is Michelle with Moksha Grace Coaching, and I am here for Moment of Presence. It is a wonderful day, and I am joined today by a lovely special guest, Krista Rizzo. I'm so happy to have you. Thanks you for joining us. Krista is an empowerment mentor for healing hearts. As a certified grief treatment educator and life coach, she is dedicated to guiding others through the intricate journey of grief. With a mission to impact 1 million lives, Krista empowers people to navigate grief on their terms in their own time. And through her compassionate approach, she provides tools and resources that promote healing and self discovery, fostering resilience and hope in the face of loss. And I also noticed there's an ebook called You Can't Tell Me How to Feel,
Yep.
Navigating the Journey of Handling Loss and Building Resilience on Your Terms. So I wanted to talk about that, but welcome. I'm honored to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me. I love talking about this stuff. It's important stuff.
It is important stuff. And it's also a lot of stuff that people don't want to talk about.
Yes. Yes.
And that I think is a big issue.
Yeah. 100%. I think a lot of people don't realize that when you're navigating grief, it's not only about death, right? So loss comes in a bunch of different forms and a lot of different flavors. And sometimes we don't attribute that or acknowledge that when we're going through it. So, it becomes something that could potentially sit with you for a long time, and you don't address it because you don't really know how to, label it, for lack of a better way to say it. Right. So I think it's important to kind of have these conversations. And I learned that more specifically, I mean, I've always kind of known it, but more specifically throughout a global pandemic and, all the things that we kind of have lost over the last several years that we never really had to think about before.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. I remember the first time that I had, back in the day in high school, I took a grief and a death and dying course. And I think we had talked about that. And so I learned, the Kubler-Ross way.
Yes.
But when I worked in healthcare, it was really the first time I had heard that or been presented with the fact that grief isn't just about death. And I was like, huh, what do you mean? And so this is a children's hospital. And so I was talking to my, my boss, and he was trying to help me because I'm a family advocate. I'm walking around, I'm trying to help people understand. And he's like, think about it. If their child is losing a kidney, they're upset about the kidney, about the surgery, but the dad who potentially had his sights on his son playing football, just like he did, and, being the high school football star, he's now grieving what that potential future was and how they were going to come together. And I had never thought about it. And that was like 15 years ago now at this point. And it just really opened my eyes to, no, grief is about anything and everything that you lose.
Sure. Yeah. And I giving it the attention that it needs has allowed me to better understand it, right? Like when you go through these cycles in your life, losing a job or your own health or a relationship or a marriage or any of the things that, maybe you haven't personally experienced them or somebody who has, even getting certified in it has given me, just more in-depth information into why and how and the importance of each experience having its own grieving process. You can't layer them all on top of each other and kind of bundle it all together because it doesn't work that way, right? You grieve for different reasons and obviously you grieve longer for certain things, right? You might grieve a relationship for a little while, but you'll grieve a death for a longer period of time. So there's a lot of really interesting, tools and resources and helpful, no doubt, right, for people, to lean into when they're, going through their grieving process. But I think for me, the biggest one is learning how to give yourself grace and to
Mm-hmm.
give yourself the time that you need. There is no timeline for grief.
Right.
Right. And one of the worst things you can hear from somebody else that said is hearing, you should be over this by now, right? Like that's a
Oh my gosh.
terrible thing to say and
Right.
to hear. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure we've all heard it. And we may or may not have said it because we were naive to understanding
Right.
what
Right.
this
We
actual
didn't know
process
better.
was, right? We didn't
Mm-hmm.
know better. I mean, we've all been there, done that, right? But I think I have a friend whose husband passed away a year ago and he went through a very aggressive cancer and it was a really long 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been gone for almost 18 months now. And, it was, right around the year mark, she said to me, someone said to her, you look really good. You're doing a really good job of getting over it. And she was like her jaw kind of hit the floor. And she was like, I didn't really know how to come back to that.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, like, because those are not things you should say to people. You should, yeah, right. So that's another thing. Like we have to educate ourselves on how to be supportive
Right.
in grief, right?
Well,
Not just understand how to navigate. How do we support people who are going through it?
Well, and so that's a great point, and
Yes.
we can do a little mini topic on that, because what are the right things to say and not to say? Because I'm sorry for your loss.
Yeah.
To me, that doesn't feel. I mean, it's kind of like traditionally what you say, but it's
Right.
not. I don't know that that's what the other person actually wants to hear.
Yeah.
Like, okay, well, thank you. Like, it's
Right.
just, so what are your suggestions? What have you found?
So I think going back to like the part of it, right? I'm a big proponent of acknowledging, validating, and acting, right? I teach my
Mm-hmm.
clients how to do that, right? You acknowledge that this is happening to you or has
Mm-hmm.
happened to you. If it's something in the past that you're kind of dredging back up, you're validating the feelings around it, because every time your feelings are valid, don't let anybody ever tell you that your feelings are invalid. And then you figure out what your action plan is. Like, how am I going to move through this? Because the
Mm-hmm.
only way out is through.
Right.
And there's not a finite end, right? So I think if you're somebody who is looking to be supportive,
Mm-hmm.
helping that person go through these steps, right? Helping them acknowledge that this has happened. This is really a terrible thing, right? And I'm here for you. I want to be supportive of
Mm-hmm.
you. I encourage you to have all the feelings that you're having. I'm validating your feelings for you, kind of thing. But I think, Krista likes to say, my heart is with you and your family at this time. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think another good response for I'm sorry for your loss, I say me too. Like when somebody says to me, I'm sorry for your loss, I say me too. I am too,
Yeah.
because I think that it kind of, it feels a little bit better than saying thank you, because it's like,
Right. Like,
okay, thanks. Um,
what do you do with
yes,
that?
yes. So I think that's also a form of an acknowledgement. Like me too. I'm sorry for it too. I didn't expect this to happen. I didn't, and I remember having a conversation with a colleague several years ago who was going through a divorce, and we had just kind of met through this networking thing, and we were out at a function, and we were kind of just getting to know each other. Like, what do you do? Who are you? Like, you have any kids? He's like, well, I'm going through a divorce. And I was like, I'm really sorry to hear that. And he looked at me and he was like, thank you for saying that. Nobody ever, divorce a lot of times can be contentious. So it's like, a lot of times it's like, good for you. And it's like, a lot of people you don't go into a marriage wanting to get divorced, I hope. Right.
You would hope.
He said that. He was like, nobody has ever said that to me. And I now will use that, because you're right. Like, I didn't walk into this relationship. I mean, it might be hard now and whatever, but I think choosing our words and really knowing how to do that. So I think just being I'm here for you. Even saying, I'm here to help. Offer up a suggestion. I'm going to bring you dinner on Tuesday night. Are you going to be around? I'm going to call you on Thursday and see if you want to, have a cup of coffee together. Right.
Right. Exactly.
That kind of stuff. I think it's important to make it a little bit more narrow. Right. Break it in, go into it, instead of saying, I'll call you
whatever
and we'll do
you
dinner.
need. Right. Because they never call.
No.
Because they don't know what they need.
They don't know what they need.
Right. And that happened to when Krista was in the hospital. She's a cancer survivor. When Krista was in the hospital, I had tons of people going, oh my gosh, just let me know if there's anything you need. first of all, I didn't know
Right.
what I needed. And
Right.
second of all, I didn't have the time or the wherewithal to
Yes.
actually pick up the phone and go, who said
Right.
what
Can you
could
make dinner tonight? Right. Like that. Yeah.
right. And then all of a sudden a neighbor of a neighbor in the community, a PTA mom, set up a train of
Oh, a
meals, and
meal train. Those are great. Yes.
this was before they
Yes.
had electronically. This was like a full on like
Yes.
sign up, old
Yeah.
school. um, but I mean that was something that was just handled, and then all of a
Yep.
sudden, food just started showing up
Yes.
every day at 5 o'clock. You
Yeah.
know, so it was like I didn't even have to think about it, and that's the kind of help that I think that is the best.
Yes.
But also, I know that there's people that can't be there at the moment or the time or the
Yes.
first week of the death, or maybe they missed the funeral, but they can be there when everything settles down,
Yep.
because that is some of the
That's the
worst
time.
time. Yeah,
Yes.
that's so
For sure.
hard, so
Yeah.
challenging.
Yes, and I have found that to be true, and even in my own experiences for my like the
Mhm.
death of my mother, the death of my dad, my brother, all the people that I have personally lost myself. It's nice to be surrounded by people when you're in it, but that in
Mhm.
it only lasts a very short time,
Right.
right? And then as you're going through this process, you know, just having someone call and just be like, "Hey, just checking in on you, right? You want to
Mhm.
go, like, let's go grab a whatever,
Right.
or want to go for a walk." Like, I had a good friend of mine who used to, my mom died during COVID, and it
Jeez.
was not like the height of it, but it was pre-vaccine, right? So, and
Right.
I live in the Northeast, she lived in Florida. It was still very,
You don't travel.
all over, right?
Yeah.
And so I traveled alone to Florida without my family
Wow.
to take care of what I needed to take care of down there. And, when I got back, a good friend of mine just reached out and she was like, "I will meet you every morning at the top of your driveway at 11 o'clock. We're going to walk." And it was like,
Mm.
okay, but that's what I needed. And it
Yeah.
wasn't like and we did it. I mean, obviously it was COVID, so we did it for like a year, right? But it was like,
Right.
that was very helpful for me.
Yeah.
And just having those kinds of interactions afterwards has
Yeah.
been very helpful for me. And I
Yeah.
think that was part of um, one of the catalysts for me getting certified to be a grief
Yeah.
educator, because I wanted to have more tools for my clients and for
Right.
myself,
Mhm.
right? It seemed like the right thing to do
Yeah.
as a learner, and
Mhm.
as somebody who just wants to, constantly be giving other people, resources and stuff to help them,
Yeah.
uh, just by virtue of, of coaching and like what we do for our people. And it's been a really wonderful thing because there's always something to learn,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's in everything that you do.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Shout out to Raymond, one of our biggest fans. So thank you for being here.
Thanks for being here.
If you are here, watching live, please make sure that you say hi in the comments. Let us know where you're from. If you have any questions, comments, ideas, concerns, just pop them in the chat,
Yeah.
and we will definitely, discuss. Especially if you have a specific situation that you're
Yeah.
dealing with. One of the other things is that when somebody passes, bringing them up and talking about them versus, oh, no, I don't want to upset somebody. And so I was telling you that there's, three people that are in the community, my community,
Yeah.
that are dealing with the loss of a loved one. And I kind of got a message from I don't know, but I kind of got a message that I kind of do know, but and it was for her. She
Yeah.
lost her husband, and so I wasn't afraid. I know her well enough to know she'd want to know, and I
Yep.
texted her. I said, "Listen, I got to tell you this."
Yeah.
And this came up. You popped into my mind, and I had this overwhelming need to tell you this.
Yeah.
And she wrote back and she said, "I totally understand what that message is. Thank you." And
Yeah.
so it's those things that you have to bring up the people that have passed.
Yes.
It's not like they're just gone. They just
Right.
don't evaporate from our memories
Yep.
and don't no longer exist. And so, but people are fearful of that. Hi Tarina, hi Jenny. Thanks for being here. Um, eh, how do you help people over that?
I like to encourage people to tell, I call it tell the living story.
Mm-hmm.
When you're going through a, a death and you are in the throes of it, and you're at the funeral, or it has just happened and it's fresh.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody tells the story of how they died, right? How did
Right.
this happen? Were they sick?
Right.
Was there an accident? Was it
Mm-hmm.
expected? Was it right? Like, it's always about how
Yeah.
they died. I
Absolutely.
like to change the conversation, and I like to talk about, how did they live? Tell me a
Mm,
story about tell me about what I don't know about them. Tell me
that's
about what a
awesome.
great grandparent they were. Tell me about what a great
Mm-hmm.
how relation friend they were. Like,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, right? Tell me about their love for hockey, right? Tell me about who they were. I can read an obituary all day long. It doesn't make me know them. And if
Right.
you're somebody that I know intimately and personally as a friend, I probably will know that person and know stories about them. But if it's not,
Mm-hmm.
I want you to tell me about who they are to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is the legacy that they're leaving behind?
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people that can be very cathartic, right? Because you're not talking about how you lost them. You're
Mm-hmm.
talking about how you're going to keep them alive. And
Yeah.
then that just kind of triggers, I
Mm-hmm.
think, for a lot of people, the allowance, like the permission that you're going to give yourself to
Mm-hmm.
keep this legacy and these conversations going. I
Yeah.
am constantly, constantly, constantly talking about my dead relatives to my children, to my friends. They all know. And they know so much that, like, I have friends who'll be like, "Oh my gosh, I thought of your mother today." And have no problem calling me to tell me about it. Or, like, we'll be
Right.
standing. My son graduated from high school last year. He went off to college, and we were standing at graduation. And one of my girlfriends said to me, "She's so happy." And it's like, you know what? Yes, you're right. She
Yeah.
is. And, like, that just makes you, as the person who has gone through that loss, I think,
Right.
more comfortable with that conversation. But it also makes other people comfortable with having the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I have there was a mom that I met at the hospital, and her daughter passed, and I give her so much just respect and props. She has not allowed that child's name
Yes.
to not be said.
Yeah.
Like, it is still known that she's here, she's
Yes.
around.
Yes.
And anytime I'll see a heart in the clouds, and I'll text the mom and I'll say,
Yeah.
"Hey,
There
I,"
she is.
and or I'll just take a picture and I'll
Yes.
just send it to her, and she's
Yeah.
like, "I love this," and
Yeah.
it brings her joy to know that her child is still being thought about.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the other important thing I wanted to mention and touch on is talking about the life
Yeah.
doesn't have to happen at the funeral. It
No.
actually is healthier and better for the person that's actively passing, for that conversation to happen in the room and talk
Yes.
about the life
Yeah.
that has been lived, that is being lived, because it helps them process their journey.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, again, that comes with a comfortability, right? I think
Hmm.
it's whatever you're comfortable with, but I love that stuff. I think, bringing your own ideas into it, or your own allowance into it, and telling people, this is, I'm okay with this, right? And I
Yeah.
think that that's a really great thing.
Yeah. Yeah. We had my father-in-law and my mother-in-law passed, and it was just telling the stories while in the room, while they're passing. They want to hear it,
Yes.
it seems like, it feels like better,
Yeah.
and energetically, to have the conversation, the laughter. And I remember sometimes people would like look like, why are you laughing? Well, we're enjoying,
We're living still.
yeah,
Yeah.
we're living, and we're bringing them into
Yeah.
that, and we're also allowing them to pass, knowing that their story goes on.
Yeah. I think
It's
that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, yeah. And part of that was I had taken a shaman last rites and rituals, and I had taken a class in that, and that was one of the things, and it was kind of talking about the journey, and that
Yeah.
helps as they're passing and transitioning. So it's so important.
Yeah. And the acknowledgement that I mean, like to think, I don't know because I have not been there, but I think, if you're going through, you're ready to make that transition and you're in a room with people who love you and who care about
Mhm.
you and are talking about you and are including you, it's easier to let go.
Yes.
That's just my 2 cents. I can't, that's my thought process around it, right? Feels good. It feels better.
It feels good. It feels lighter. And I laugh because there's someone in the family who is the opposite, and let's just sit quietly.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, okay, so I'm going to have a list of what I want. So when it
Yeah.
comes to that time, I want this music being played.
Right. I want a
I
party,
want
man.
these people in this
Yeah.
room.
Yeah.
I want to hear the laughter. I want to be spoken to. I want to continue hearing the
Yeah.
stories. Like, this is what, and that is one thing that we have the power to control. We can't control how we came into this world because
Right.
we just kind of came through this channel and our canal. But we do have some control.
Yes.
If
Potentially, if it's yes.
right,
Right.
potentially. So we can set ourselves up if in the situation, here's some instructions.
Yes.
So,
Or
like, I
yeah,
have,
right. Yes, you should definitely have instructions. I remember when my dad died,
yes.
my brother and I were walking through the funeral home, and we're family friends with the owners, right? And my brother and we were like looking around, and he was like, "That would be a good place for a bar." And we just kind of both looked at each other, and I was like, "We should have a bar." And he was like, "We should totally have a bar." And the guy who was like the owner looked at us and he was like, "You guys can do whatever you want. I don't care what you do." And we were like, my brother owned restaurants at the time. And we were like, "Great, we're going to cater in some food. We're going to have a bar. We're going to put that in a different
Yes.
room." And let me tell you something. My aunt flew down from Florida, my aunt and uncle, and my aunt went home and changed everything that she wanted. She was like, "I want a bar at my wake." Not one person left. Every single person stayed. They had a drink. Even if they didn't have a drink, like they just stayed, and it was so lovely, quite frankly, right?
Yes.
We really just had a a good time, quote unquote,
Yeah.
right? But it was like it was nice to connect with people rather than walking through the line and them saying I'm so sorry, and you say, "Oh, thank you so much," and then you don't see them. They like sign the book, right? But now people are standing around because you, the
Right.
family, are encouraging them to stand around and tell those stories.
Yes.
"Oh my gosh, I haven't seen you since you were in high school. It's so good to see you. Introduce
Mhm.
me to your family," right? It's been
Mhm.
25 years, right? Those I think those kinds of things go a long way. I mean, I'm not saying you have to actually have a party in the funeral home, but if you can, I'm a big fan.
Listen, I'm Greek heritage. I'm telling you,
The
it's
Italians
Greek.
loved it.
Right, the Italians and the Greeks, man, we party. My aunt passed away. My uncle had passed away first, and my cousin was like, "Will you bring me a flask?" I was like, "Sure."
Yeah,
"What do you want in it?" He told me. I said, "Okay." I sneak it in. So when his mom passed, I was like, "Do I have
right.
flask duty again?" And he's like, "Yes."
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
yes. So I mean, you're not there to get rip roaring drunk, but
No.
if you're gonna have a little, we drink in church. I mean, for God's sakes, we take some wine at church. But the other thing is the standing. Let's all go up to a podium and let's tell
Yeah,
stories.
yeah.
That can be so intimidating to
Yes,
people.
yes.
Whereas, like at my aunt's funeral, it was whoever wanted to just speak,
Right.
just kind of either sat or stood up from where they were
Yes.
and just told the story, and everyone else just kind of moved around and just like
Yeah.
would look and go yes, and we'd laugh. It was just such a much more of a relaxed and
Yes.
pleasant
Yes.
environment versus the whole rigmarole of sitting back and gotta
Yeah,
be
and
quiet
yes.
and
Yes.
oh my
The
goodness.
ceremony.
The ceremony. My
Yeah.
grandmother at my grandfather's funeral during the ceremony, we're sitting in the front, and she was 94, 95
Oh.
when he passed, and she lets out what's he saying? I can't hear, and we just like, we're like, oh my gosh. And then she made some other comment, but it was just, and we
Yes.
kind of like all
Life.
giggled and laughed.
Yep.
Yes, because life is lifing. It's
Yes.
happening. It's happening.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, Raymond, I think being cremated with Garth Brooks standing outside the fire playing would be
Sounds great.
appropriate. Yeah, I think that's awesome. Um, and so we had talked about that grief isn't just about death, that
Right.
grief can be about career. And I know
Yeah.
you had a long corporate career,
Yep.
and we both had a
Yep.
ending, and
Yeah.
there's a
Yes.
identity death that
Hmm.
happens with that, and we have to mourn the identity that we once were, and move into another one. But there's all kinds of losses.
Yeah.
How can people be more aware that someone is actually feeling grief, and it's not just like, oh, you lost your job, big deal, go get another one? Like, there's more
Yeah.
to it, or a
Yeah.
divorce, or
Yeah. I think that goes back to like the acknowledging, validating, and acting, right? Like if
Mhm.
you are going to be supportive of somebody, I'm really like it sucks that you lost your job, or it's terrible that, your relationship just ended, right?
Mhm.
Acknowledging that with them to let
Mhm.
them know that, oh, you're paying attention, right? And then validating it. I totally understand that you are angry and you are sad and that you are overwhelmed and whatever it is that you're feeling. I get it. And I just want you to know that, I'm here if you want to talk about it. I'm here if you want to, like we talked about before, you want to grab a cup of coffee, you want to go for
Mhm.
a walk, you want to, scream and throw plates at a wall at one of those, rooms. Let's go.
Yeah,
like
smash
I
house.
am a ride or die. So like when my mom died, my best friend also lives in Florida, and I had a one-way ticket down there, and it was open-ended because I wasn't sure how long I was gonna be.
Mhm.
And we're selling the house and getting rid of all of our stuff, and it was all very fast. So within 12 days, I was down, buried, and everything was sold, and I was
Wow.
back up north. Um, but at one point, my brother said to me, "What are we going to do with her car?" Because he didn't need it. His kids had cars, and I was like, "What am I going to do with it? I live up in New York. Like, what am I going to do?" And then I'm laying in bed one night, and I was like, "Wait a minute. What if I drove her car back?" And like, I now had a teenager who was going to be 16 in a year, and I was like, and I just give him my mother's car, and then I can take back with me rather than shipping all the stuff that I wanted to bring back.
Yeah.
So my best friend would come over every morning at like 9 o'clock and just hang out with me and go through my mom's stuff and do whatever. So she walks in the next morning, and I was like, tell me if I'm crazy. But I think what I'm going to do is when I'm ready to go, I'm just going to pack the car and drive up to the house in Connecticut. And she looked at me and she was like, hold on a second. So she calls her husband, who we all went to high school together. She calls her husband and she's like, babe, you're not going to like, Krista wants to, do you think this is crazy? Krista wants to drive to, New York, with all the stuff that she wants to bring back from her mom's funeral and all the things. And she's like telling him the story. And he was like, yeah, I don't think that's crazy, but she can't go by herself. Like, you have to go with her. And we both knew that was coming, but we needed him to say it. And she was like, I totally have to go with her. And we ended up like making it like a 2-day Thelma and Louise. Like we were like, oh, let's go to Washington, D.C. We haven't been there since we were in high, like,
Oh
and
my
we had,
god.
that was like what I needed on the back end of that
Right.
trip. Right. So it was
Yeah.
like the two of us, and it was still COVID. So it was like nobody was staying in these really nice hotels for super cheap.
Right.
And so we were in the W Hotel. We stayed there for 2 nights because there was a blizzard. And I just dropped her off at the airport on the way up to the house. And those are the kinds of things that I'm that person for a lot of people. Like if someone calls
Mhm.
me tomorrow and says, I got to get out of here, are you free to hop on a plane? I'll be like, I will cancel my schedule and I will get on a plane with you. Like if you
Yeah.
know that you have those kinds of people, I call that the support wheel.
Yeah.
Right? Knowing who's on your support wheel and,
Mhm.
get a piece of paper and draw a circle and make it look like a pie and then put somebody's name in each piece of pie.
Mhm.
You could have 2 people on it. You could have 1 person on it. You could have 30
Mhm.
people on it. But
Mhm.
understand who those people are for you, because
Mhm.
some people are the kind of people who will drop everything and hop on a plane or drive halfway across the country to help you get through what
Right.
you need to get through. And there are other people who are not maybe that intent, that crazy like I am, but like that are willing to meet you at the top of the driveway for a walk or, you can lean on for this, or pick up your children from, practice
Right.
because you just can't do it. It's like even
Yeah.
the smallest things are helpful to somebody who is grieving.
Watch the animals while you're driving back from Florida.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
I mean,
All of it.
yes, yes. And everybody has their place. There were people that when Krista was sick, there were people that disappeared from our
Yes.
life.
Yes.
And there were some other family members that were like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe this." And I'm just like, it's okay. Like, they
Yeah.
can't do this.
Yeah.
They can't do this. And I think that's the other thing, is respecting what people can and cannot do. There are people that can go to, like I'll go to the funeral, I'll go to the wake.
Yeah.
I think the cemetery is much more of a private,
Yes.
intimate thing.
Mhm.
Like, if I'm not part of the family
Yep.
in some way, shape, or form, like I hold back from the
Yes.
cemetery. But my grandmother used to drag me to funerals. Like, I didn't know these people.
Yep.
So as a kid, that was just always something that I did. But there's other people that
Yeah.
they're not going like
Yeah.
that. They cannot. It's just not something that they can do.
Yep.
But they will be the one to go pick up the meal and bring it to the
Yes.
house, so that when you
Yes.
come back, it's waiting for you. Or the one a week or two later that you're still at
Yeah.
your house, you haven't eaten, and it's like, hey, come on, let's just go grab something to eat.
Yep.
Everyone has their place. Everyone, and as long as you can respect everyone's
Yep.
choices,
Yep.
I think that's so important. And I just want to touch real quick on the knowing what you want when it's your time and you leave instructions. Make sure that everyone knows the instructions, or at least knows who's in charge to implement the
Accurate.
instructions.
Yes.
Because then you don't want everyone fighting, like, that's not what she said, or that's not what
Put it
he
in writing.
wanted.
Yeah.
You're crazy. Why would they put you in charge? Like, just make sure everybody knows. And I once had a funeral director tell me, leave your instructions where people can access them. Like, don't lock it up in your safe. And
Right.
so they actually gave me, it was so funny. I was at, like, I don't know where I was, at a conference or something. They gave us these plastic folders, like very thick plastic folders.
Yeah.
They said, put it in a storage bag and then stick it in your freezer. Stick it in your freezer. Because everybody
Someone's
will
going to be in the freezer. Yeah.
Everyone will be able. Make sure you tell someone it's in the freezer. You don't want them coming over and taking taking all the food and going, "Oh, this is all the information we needed,
Yes.
and we didn't have."
Yes.
Great, it's
now
in
that
the
it's
freezer.
over. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't do that. You can't do
No.
that.
That's good advice.
Yeah, freezer. I even have a cookie recipe
In the freezer.
in the freezer. I have a
like
cookie
it.
recipe for
like it.
what cookies I want served at the.
Excellent.
Yes,
Down
it's so
to
important.
every detail.
You have to.
Yeah. No, I love it. I think it's great.
You don't want somebody reading something that you don't want.
That is also true. That is also true. One thing that I want to just touch on real quick is when you talked about people stepping away during like difficult times. I think it's important to, like you said, respect their boundaries, right? Because there's reasons why people step away. It's a comfortability thing. It might be something that's a little bit too close to home for them, and a loss that they may have had in their own lives. I a lot of times say that, there are seasons to relationships, and some of them, are for the duration, and some of them only last a spring or a summer, or, a few of them. But I think that if you have the understanding of, it's okay for other people to have boundaries, even when you're the person who's grieving, right? Because they might not be able to handle it. And it doesn't mean that they don't care about you. But it just is, like you said, it's just something that they would rather do other things, or they might show back up at a different time to, support you in a different way, or they might not. They might just pull away altogether. And it's nothing that you did. It's probably nothing that I say that a lot about a lot of things, right? When somebody, oftentimes when you lose touch with people, it's like a lot of times you don't understand why, and you're trying to get closure or whatever it is you're trying to get. Sometimes you're not going to get it, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But that's another thing that you might have to grieve. And, just knowing that you did everything you needed to do, or you feel like you did your best, or
Mhm.
you acted in the best way that you knew how at the time, um, can also be helpful in that process for you.
Yeah. And, and you have to know yourself enough to know to listen, right?
Yes.
And listen from within, because you'll get the guidance that you need
Yep.
as far as how to move through the process of grief. And like you said, it can be it can be short, it can
Yep.
feel short, and then it can come back, a year later and just smack you right in the
Yeah.
face.
Yeah.
Somebody had once said to me, it's not linear,
It
it's
is not.
circular,
Yep.
it's spiral actually, and it gets wider and then
Yes.
it comes in and then it gets wider again. And so that truly was so helpful, and that's with everything,
Yes.
as well. um yeah, there's just so much to this,
Yeah.
to this to this conversation.
There's a lot.
And respecting how anyone handles it is the other thing, is
Yeah.
to leave your judgment outside, because how someone handles it is not for you to decide.
Yeah.
I had a friend that lost her husband, and when she got with the kids, her adult kids, they they went to their favorite amusement park, and she was like, and she literally, I don't give a shit what
Right.
anybody thinks about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is bonding for me and my family,
Yes.
and this is how we're bringing ourselves back together. And I was like,
Great.
you
You go.
go, like, you go and you have a freaking great time,
That's
because
right.
you're not the one that's gone, you're living, and
Right.
so you can honor the life
100%.
by continuing to live.
Yep. For sure. And that's
And
what you do.
right, and that's what you do. That's what you do. That's
Yeah.
the best way to honor somebody. Um, so I saw something on your webpage that I
Yeah.
wanted to bring up, and
Oh,
I
sure.
just loved it, and I wanted to read it. I want you to fail. When you fail,
Okay.
you learn. When you fail, you allow yourself to make mistakes. When you fail, you admit you aren't perfect. When you fail, you change, you grow, and you evolve. I want you to fail. Failure is the first step to achievement.
Yeah.
You could actually take the word failure out and put like die, but like
Uh,
a shadow death kind of, ego death kind of way.
sure.
I mean, you could, because aren't we all like
Yeah.
passing and
Yeah.
becoming different and transforming
Yep.
every single
Yeah.
moment, every
Yes.
single
Yes.
day?
Yeah.
Um, and there are times where we have to grieve our old selves.
Yeah. For sure. Right. We're not, I mean, I'm definitely not the same person I was even a year ago. Right. So, for sure. And I
Yeah.
think that, we have this idea, we humans are very funny creatures. Like, we have these
Aren't we?
ideas and these expectations. And, if it's not like, life isn't, again, like we said, life is not linear, right? And when it doesn't go according to plan,
Mm-hmm.
um, we find ourselves in places that can feel self-deprecating or
Mm-hmm.
negative, or I'm a failure. And so I often try to teach people to use failure as a positive,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a way to learn, right? It's not, you
Yeah.
did so bad on your test. It's like, okay, well, what did you get wrong and how are we going to fix it?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Um, and I think that when you kind of reframe the idea of failure, and I tell people every day, there's no such thing as perfection, right? Nobody
Right.
is perfect. None of us are perfect. I
God,
feel
why
like,
would we want to be?
no, right. Like,
Oh,
be
God.
messy and be creative, and step outside the box that we're not in. Like, that also makes me crazy. Like, there's no such thing as, like, what box are you in? I don't know. Um, but I think that we've kind of been conditioned to think more streamlined. And if we
Mm-hmm.
let go of that, and broaden our thought processes, and
Yeah.
give ourselves grace, and remove the judgment, and embrace the creativity and the weirdness, and just all the processes that come around life and death, and loss, and
Mm-hmm.
living, it tends to lend to a much more rich experience for you in your life.
Yeah. Absolutely. interesting that you brought that up. I had a conversation with, I was talking to my mom the other day, and I was telling her you were coming on, and I was like, oh, we're going to talk about grief, and you should come on. And she was like, or I said you should watch, and she was, well, why? I was like, well, because right now you're grieving your future, her
Yeah.
back, and lots of issues, and so she's like, wait, but that's a thing.
Yeah.
And I was like,
That's the thing, Mom.
yeah, getting older
Yes.
and grieving the life that, or what your body used to be able to do
Mm-hmm.
that now can't do,
Sure.
and you're getting older and you can't, this isn't a possibility, and so yeah, this is grief.
Yeah.
I said,
Yeah.
so yeah, you should tune in. So hopefully she's.
I hope you're watching.
I hope you're watching, Mom. Um, so Krista, where can people find you?
So I have a specific website for my grief stuff. It's called youcan'ttellmehowtofeel.com. And there is, I've got a bunch of resources on there. There's an ebook and there's a journal, and I did a course creation, and there's a membership that you can actually invest in and join the private group that I have that does, we talk about all the things in the community.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can find me at KristaRizzo.com. Like I'm findable at all the places.
Findable at all the
Yeah.
places.
Yeah.
Well, before we leave, will you join us for our deep breaths? And
I
it
will.
hasn't been as heavy of a conversation as probably people expected, but still, we should be able to take this in
Yeah.
and
Let's
kind
do
of,
it.
be here. So big deep breath in, and then hold at the top. 3, 2, 1. Long exhale. Big deep breath in. Bring those shoulders up. 3, 2, 1. Long exhale. And one more, because we do everything in threes. Big deep breath in. And long exhale. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you'll come back and we'll have more conversations.
Yeah.
As I always say at the end, we all can wake up and have a good day or a bad day. It is all up to us. So choose wisely. Thank you. And I'll see all of you next week.